Hey, I'm Alex from Board Game Co, and today we're doing a Should You Back It on CMON's God of War. I'll be going to a bunch of things today. I'll be going across the campaign, what it's covering, my thoughts on the game itself from having played it a few times, not a full review, but just initial thoughts. I'll be going into the pledge levels, the expansions, common complaints that I've seen on the campaign page, and my own thoughts on those, and of course the Should You Back It. Now before we dive into all of that, and of course links and timestamps to everything down below, before we dive into all of that, a few disclaimers to get out of the way. Disclaimer number one is I am CMO of GameFound. Please take that into account as we go through this video. Any potential biases that brings to the table, just take that into account. I do think that my coverage of this is going to be fairly consistent to, well, all my coverage of CMON campaigns in general, but of course take that into account. Disclaimer number two, and just as importantly, if not more importantly, is that in general, when working with CMON, sometimes they do engage in paid content around various campaigns I cover. In this particular campaign, they actually have not. There's no paid coverage around this game, but of course there is that muddied waters of in general. I assume they will reach out for more sponsored content in the future, and of course that means I do want to keep that relationship healthy and active, so just take that into account. And then disclaimer number three is from the very start of my channel, before I ever took a cent from CMON, before I was CMO of GameFound, I have been a fan of CMON games, of their campaigns. I do not think that they as a company do everything correctly. I have called out their stuff when I thought it was not something great. I've also defended them many times when other people called them out for things that I didn't have as much of a problem with. So I definitely am overall a fan of their games, and I'm overall a fan of their company, while I've not been shy around calling things out that I disliked, or whether it's games or practices. But all of those things, and at the end of the day, if any of these factors muddy the waters for you or make this a video that you don't get value from, I completely and totally respect that. But with that, let's go ahead and start this off and dive into the campaign. God of War, the board game, from CMON Games. Not to be confused with God of War, the card game, which is a previous game they've made using the God of War IP, but this time they have the God of War, the board game, which currently has 3,600 backers, $657,000 raised, 1 day left to go in the campaign, and they did actually drop the all-in, so in theory, there's not going to be more stuff. Historically speaking, CMON tends to drop more stuff after I put out my dedicated videos. We'll see what happens in this one. This is a 1 to 4 player game. It's going to be a 60-minute playtime, which take that with a grain of salt. From the games I've seen so far, 60 minutes is what happens when you either are playing the tutorial scenario or when you lose. But the one game I've seen that actually had the second scenario that won, that was a 4-hour long game, although I do not think it would actually be 4 hours. My guess is this is probably in the 90-minute range in general, 60 minutes being a fast game, 120 minutes being a slow game, and 90 minutes is probably your sweet spot for this game. As far as the player count, it is a 1 to 2 player game by default with a 3 to 4 player expansion, meaning strictly speaking this game is meant to be played as a solo player controlling both characters as a single unit that moves around the board with their own unique board of how they operate, or controlling two characters who are operating in synergy in terms of the way they take out the game, or take out the enemies in the game. And there's a 3 to 4 player expansion, which we will talk about a bit more soon, but introduces new characters who have a degree of helping out the troop in general, engaging in some combat, but a little less so than the rest. As far as the type of game, this is going to be a little similar to Cthulhu Death May Die, very different in many ways, but it's going to have similarities to Cthulhu Death May Die. You're controlling characters, you're wandering around a board, you are taking on a combination of a scenario and a boss, meaning you're playing against a scenario, then you have a specific boss, or not specific boss, you have a variable number of bosses you can loop into that scenario, so the game is going to be different every time you play it, and then you have different enemies you're fighting against in the scenario as well, so the combination of bosses, enemies, and scenario is going to define the game you're playing on the table today. The base game, if I recall correctly, comes with 8 scenarios. One of the main core expansions comes with 6 scenarios. I think there have been, I don't know if there have been more scenarios added as stretch goals. I don't know if there have. I know there have been many bosses and many enemies added as stretch goals. I don't know if I've seen more scenarios. But as far as that, that's the kind of core idea of the game. You're basically taking on a scenario. The scenario is going to have a point in the scenario where you bring the boss into play, and that's either going to happen as time ticks up, in which case the boss is going to enter the game empowered and stronger, or you can accomplish the scenario goal, which will bring the boss into play, and then when that time eventually hits that line, the boss will power up if you haven't killed them. Your goal is to power yourself up, Atreus and, oh my gosh, Kratos, did I say Atreus? Kratos and Atreus? Atreus, I think it's Atreus, but Kratos and Atreus, you're going to be powering them up as a team in order to be able to take down the boss when he enters the board, because the boss is strong. And so you're trying to constantly work together, and working together is a big part of the game. Whether you're playing it solo or whether you're playing with more players, one of the things you're doing is you're constantly trying to make sure that you have multiple characters dealing damage to enemies. Because when an enemy dies and they have damage tokens from different players on the board, from different people playing, then you're going to go ahead and roll the synergy die, which is going to be how you power up. So you could just kill an enemy, but if you do it in tangent with the other players, and again, this is true even if you're playing it solo, that you're trying to make sure that you spread that damage out and you work together, you had synergy, and that's how you power up. You're giving yourself the ability to draw more cards, which effectively is more actions every round, giving you the abilities to go ahead and add to your own little, unique little tech tree that you have in the game, and just generally try getting stronger across the course of the game, which is how you take out the boss. That's the kind of general overview. I'd say the last thing I didn't really cover is the way actions work is going to be card driven. So you're going to draw cards every turn. Those cards let you interact, they let you move, and they let you play them to specific attacks. Each player is going to have different colors of attacks, each of them to operate differently, and playing the cards to attacks is going to be a big part of the game. Trying to go ahead and also going to be upgrading yourself, like I said already. You'll be adding new cards to your deck, gives you more flexibility. Across the course of an experience, you might add new attack cards as well. That's kind of everything that's happening in the game, at least as much as I can give you with an overview of what's going on. As far as the game itself, that's the game. So that's going to be, the what the game is. We haven't really gone to the campaign heavily. That's going to be the game. As far as my thoughts on the game, and these are definitely intro thoughts. I'm specifically not reviewing this yet because I don't know. I'm not yet comfortable with what I've seen to give it a full review. My intro thoughts on the game, and keep in mind I am coming into this as someone who is a huge fan of Cthulhu Death May Die, which is my #2 game of all time as of last year. And this definitely does have elements of similarity. To be very clear, I currently prefer Cthulhu Death May Die, but I think God of War does enough things differently that there's place for both in my collection, at least as of right now, but I do have hesitancies. I like the game overall a lot. I like different parts of the game. To begin with, you're powering up your characters, something I enjoy. It does have that sense of escalation. You're getting stronger as you go through the game, you're getting more powerful, but then the boss enters the board, and they are strong and powerful and are slowly powering up as well. Not to the same way and extent that they do in Death May Die, which is something I don't like as much, but they are strong, you have to take them out, and it's not the easiest game. If you've watched some of the playthroughs out there, there's a playthrough of the first scenario, there's 2 playthroughs of the first scenario, there's 2 playthroughs of the second scenario, and the second scenario in particular, one of those playthroughs involved, winning, and the other playthrough involved losing, but it does seem to be a game that is definitely challenging. While the first scenario has had moments, I guess if you watched my first playthrough, a lot of people commented that it seemed too easy, but then someone else playing through it lost that one, and again, the second scenario is definitely harder as well. So it does seem to be a game that is not the most easy, which is something I enjoy. Overall, the way the characters power up, I like the variety of characters and enemies and bosses and everything else. I like the combination of choosing a scenario and a boss and mixing those together. All those things overall I enjoy. I really like the synergy system. It gives you a different puzzle that I'm not used to seeing in these types of games. Because one of the things I tend to look for when I enjoy a game, it's just because I enjoy it, is there space for it in my collection, in my game time. And to a large extent, you have to be doing something different or better for that to be the case. And in the case of God of War, the main thing it does differently is that synergy system. It's not the most innovative thing I've ever seen, not by a long shot, but it is an enjoyable little puzzle as far as the fact that you're trying to operate different characters and you have to try to make sure they're all dealing their own little points of damage as you go through it. It's a slightly different way to approach these game systems, and sometimes just make that trade-off of maybe it's worth killing that thing without getting the synergy boost because it's worth it. Right now, we just need to take that threat out. On the other hand, if we get the synergy boost, we're going to power up, we're going to get more things, so there is that little trade-off as you go through it, which I generally appreciate. As far as my hesitancy, so overall I enjoy it because it's doing things that CMON has generally done well. It has elements of similarity to Cthulhu Death May Die, which is a game I really enjoy, and has things that make it different, that make it compelling as well, and the sheer variety of bosses and characters and enemies, not characters, sheer variety of bosses and enemy units, all makes it something that I think I'd appreciate going through it to an extent. The areas where I have hesitancies are twofold, and these are just areas where I just don't know yet. I need to play more. I need to see more of the game. I've played the first scenario 3 times, I've played the second scenario twice, so I've already played this game a decent amount of time. I've enjoyed going through this one. I've had an opportunity to play it, but I haven't had an opportunity to see, well, everything. Not by a long, or even close to it. And so the areas where I have hesitancies are primarily twofold. The first area where I have a hesitancy is the uncertainty as far as the character variety. One of the things I love about many CMON games is the sheer variety of characters that give you reasons to reapproach it. Cthulhu Death May Die having some of the best character variety and the enjoyment of powering up and leveling up characters in different ways that give you a drastically different experience every single time. And in God of War, at least from what we've seen so far, there are 2 ways that characters level up. The first is that they have a deck of unique attack cards which you'll unlock them throughout the course of the scenario, but not a lot of them. You'll only unlock a few of them, and those will give you different puzzles as far as, oh, you have this new type of attack or ability that will force you to re-examine the game from a slightly different approach, and you're drawing from a decently large deck, but you're only drawing 1 or 2 per round per game, which means that you don't have a ton of opportunity to see them every game, which gives you some degree of variety. The second is that each character has different upgrade tracks as far as ways you can spend your upgrade points, and those are variable as well. Now, I don't know the full variety of those, and I hope it's enough to keep me interested in long term, but I do think that I really enjoy the character variety and differences that you see in Cthulhu Death May Die, and so I'm uncertain how how interesting the characters are going to stay across the course of playing through all the various scenarios of God of War, the board game. So it's a hesitancy, it's an uncertainty. I wish there were more. I understand why there's not. I mean, the character is based around the game is based around these characters, Kratos and Atreus, but I do think, I wish there was, I hope there's as much as possible as far as those upgrade trees or cards that keep interesting, but it's certainly an area of hesitancy. The other area of hesitancy I have is this a game where I want to play through and beat each scenario, or is it a game where I want to just play it? Now what I mean by that is when I play something like a campaign game, I'm often trying to finish it, and then in most cases I'm done with it, in some cases I want to play through it again. When I play Cthulhu Death May Die or Zombicide, I just want to play the game. I pick a scenario, whether it's a new one or one I've played before, but I'm just here to play the game. I don't yet know if God of War is a game that I want to win or play, meaning that first scenario that I've already won, which I played it 3 times, the first 2 times I lost, the 3rd time I won. After the 3rd time winning it, I have already less of an interest of playing it. I don't think I have no interest, but I definitely have less interest in playing that first scenario, so the question is, do I mentally view it as something to beat or something to play? The second scenario, which I've lost twice now, I want to play that one again and really beat it, but do I want to play it again after? Is it still as fun and as compelling? Is it more about the sense of discovery combined with the unique challenges, or is it just fun to play? I know that Cthulhu Death May Die, that first scenario, I've played that first scenario over 10 times. I've won it many times, I've lost it many times, but I've played it so often. So that's the other area of hesitancy I have around the game, where for whatever reason, instinctively it feels a bit more like I might want to beat the scenarios, but I don't yet know whether I want to replay those scenarios. So I don't yet know. Those are my 2 areas of hesitancy. The character depth and variety, and is this a game I'm going to replay or just a game I'm going to play through? That's kind of my mini first impressions review. Not a review, but first impressions of the game. Which brings us to the pledge levels. Let's go through the campaign itself. The pledge level is a lot of fun things to go through. I'm not going to go through a ton of this. If you want to see more, you can check out my 2-back or not 2-backs. I've covered this game twice now already. There's a lot of stuff to go through, a lot of things to go through as far as the pages, the tons of miniatures and monsters. We're not going to do a ton of that in this video. It's a dedicated should you back it, but it's going to have a lot of thoughts just whatever. Lots of stuff on the campaign page to go through. Past that, as far as the pledge levels, which we'll get to eventually over here, the pledge levels, monsters, miniatures, all those things, pledge levels are going to be twofold over here, if we can get to them. We have number 1. Pledge level number 1 is going to be the Mortal Pledge for $70 for the game. This is getting a $20 discount supposedly on the big game, and then there's the Demigod Pledge. This does not come with stretch goals, to be clear. The Demigod Pledge is going to include stretch goals for the game, as well as the Brothers at Arms expansion, or whatever it's, I don't know if it's called Brothers at Arms, we'll see it shortly, but it includes an expansion as well. Just offhand, there's 21 people who have pledged for this Mortal Pledge, and we'll get into a full should you back it later. But this Mortal Pledge you should be ignoring offhand. It is not a good reason to get the game. You can get this game cheaper at retail once you factor in shipping. This is just a bad way to get your hands on the base game. Now, it might be good for some people depending on your region or accessibility, so it's possible those 21 people know exactly what they're doing and they're doing it right. Otherwise, I'd say instinctively, wait for retail on this. It's probably cheaper wherever you are, probably. But maybe there's some places where it's not. The other pledges that we're going to look at, we're not even going to look at the Mortal Pledge. We'll talk more about it a little bit later with the common complaints. But there's the Demigod Pledge for $90, and then there's the Godhood Pledge for $240, which represents a $20 discount on buying things separately. Meaning over here, they reference the $165 savings on this over here. Now, to be fair, in the update where they talk about it, they do specifically say it's a $20 discount, but that's kind of more hidden. The number they're trying to show a lot more is that, hey, $165 savings, that's off the retail valuation. It's not based off of what you pay. So and again, it's totally fine either way. Just make sure you know what you're looking at over here. This is a $20 savings from buying all the things individually. If you bought the Demigod Pledge for $90 and the individual expansions, it would all add up to $260 for the game. Which brings us to the actual expansions themselves. So those are the pledge levels. We'll come back to the should you back later. The expansions over here are going to be as follows. We have the Huldra Brothers coming to you with the Blacksmith Brothers expansion. This is the expansion that they added. Effectively, they added it as a freebie. Now, I don't know what the intent was. I can't speak for what goes on behind the doors, and I don't actually know. Like, I work for GameFound, but I don't know what went on behind the doors. I don't know if this was originally going to be offered as an optional buy, but whether it was or wasn't, what they said effectively is, hey, here's this thing that you guys have been complaining about the shipping a lot, because shipping is expensive. We'll come to that later, but you guys have been complaining about the shipping, so we're going to go ahead and throw in this game, this is the expansion, which would have been a $35 cost. This should offset most of the shipping costs for most of you. So here's an extra thing that's being thrown into the pledge because shipping is so expensive. This will offset that. You're basically getting a free expansion in exchange for paying for shipping, which again, if the plans genuinely were to sell that, that is a good deal, so to speak. Obviously, it's better for them to give you a $35 expansion than to give you $35 off in shipping, but the representative savings here is pretty decent, and it gives you a full 4-player game for those who want it. But as far as the expansion itself, what does it do? It makes the game a 3 to 4-player game. It introduces the brothers, so it adds new miniatures to the game, and those brothers are going to be operating a little differently than Atreus and Atreides and Kratos. Am I saying them right? I don't know. Kratos and I think Atreides. Atreus, not Atreides. Atreus. Kratos and Atreus. But effectively, they are focused on building things up. I think there's a degree of bag building, if I recall correctly, but there's going to be a degree of helping build things up, but also making the enemies more stronger as you go through the game as well. So that's essential to have that balance maintained and all that. But it gives you 2 new characters to go through the game. That's the main focus of this expansion. So if you want to play this game 3 to 4 players, now you have the ability to do so. Or you can play it 2 players and control multiple characters each if you want to have that experience as well. So you have that flexibility. The next expansion, and we're going to be going through these in the order that they release them, the next expansion is going to be the Valkyries expansion. The Valkyries expansion is basically giving you 5 new gods. That's all it's really doing. It's giving you 5 new bosses to fight against. 5 boss figures, 5 boss dashboard, a rules leaflet, and 10 boss behaviors. So there's no new content past the new characters, which new characters are new content, but there's no new scenarios, there's no new rule set. It's just straight up, here's 5 new gods, bosses to fight against with their representative material that you need and a specific theme around them. Enjoy. It's going to be a crowdfunding exclusive expansion, as most of them are, and it's going to run you, I think it was $25 to $35. What was it for? It was... Where is it? Over here? God of War. Nope. Where is the expansion price point? Is it somewhere here on this page? I think it was $35, but we could always go to the main page over here. Go to the main page over here. You'll see the expansions are going to run you if we ignore the stretch goals over there. And the stretch goals, by the way, I'm not going to heavily go through these, but this is a lot of, maybe I'll go through stretch goals. Maybe I'll go through them. But over here, we have the expansions. We have the Sisters of Fate. No, the Valkyries for $35. The $60 for the Ghost of the Past, $40 for the Pantheon, and Sisters of Fate for $35. So, going back over here to the Valkyries expansion, that's basically 5 bosses over there. Which brings us to the Ghost of the Past expansion. The Ghost of the Past expansion is the only one that is going to be available in retail, but if you back it on crowdfunding, you will get this exclusive boss. So there is a crowdfunding exclusive material here, but the expansion will be available in retail. At least seems like it will be. And it is expansion. It's not standalone. It's going to introduce you 2 new miniatures. We have the Ghost of Sparta and we have Athena, giving you a different look as far as a team up in the game. Another strong character, another fast character. It's going to introduce a bunch of new enemies to go through and a bunch of new bosses. I believe it was it 4 new bosses and 6 new enemies? I believe it was 4 new bosses and 6 new enemies to go through, and that's going to be a 5th boss if you're buying the additional boss, as well as 6 scenarios to go through. So you're also going to have 6 scenarios to go through the game, so a new way that there's some NPCs in the scenario, just different content for the game. That's the expansion there. It's going to run you $60, and again, gives you that exclusive content, the exclusive miniature, exclusive boss, if you want to go ahead and dive into that. For $40, we have the Gods of the Pantheon expansion. The Gods of the Pantheon is going to introduce 5 new gods again, 5 new bosses again. I keep saying gods, but bosses. It's going to be a crowdfunding exclusive. It's going to be $40. It introduces 5 new bosses, all with a specific theme, and this one actually introduces new content as well. So in addition to the fact that you're getting 5 bosses, just like the Valkyries, you're also getting the additional ability to kind of level up, to take on a synergy of 3 bosses in the game, where you're going to go through a bit of an arc of going through those characters, trying to make sure you defeat them one at a time, and it's also going to give you a larger synergy track as well. So this gives you, if you really want to get that feeling of powering up, but at the cost of a longer game experience, this is going to give you that option. I haven't looked into whether you can mix and match other bosses into these, but I don't know entirely as far as that. But it will give you the ability to have a 3-boss arc in the game, which is a fun little thing to go into. If you've played games like Marvel United from CMON, then well, depending how much you've played them, you might know the difference between a single shot versus going through a little arc of multiple bosses, and I'm looking forward to that ability to power up, well, even more in the game. And then, of course, going through the bosses, which we're not going to do as well. The last expansion is going to be the Sisters of Fate. This introduced the All-In pledge, and we have the Sisters of Fate, which on its own is $35. It also introduced the All-In for $240, and the Sister of Fate over here introduces 3 new bosses, as well as, again, a specific scenario arc. 2 of these bosses, Lancus and Atropos over here, are usable in regular content, although they have specific content for this scenario that's going to be produced here, whereas the Clotho is only available for this particular scenario. So it's a unique scenario as far as the way to deal with these 3 in combination, and then again, 2 of them can be mixed and matched into other content in different ways, and they have different cards for it. There are specific cards for this specific scenario, so because you have a very specific tailored scenario based around the Sisters of Fate as a trio in general. Again, I don't think you can mix in this particular incident. I don't think you can mix in other bosses in to mix it up, but don't know 100%. And that's basically what we have as far as the various content for the game. The last thing that's available is there is an additional optional buy for the special bonus cards. If you follow this campaign page before the campaign began, then you will already get that for free. Otherwise, it's $5 to go ahead and get that. And that's what we have for all of those. I guess loosely, maybe I'll go through these stretch goals over here. I don't know if I mean, there's just more characters. If we go through these, just more various monsters and miniatures, we can just go through them all quickly so you can see them all. These are called stretch goals. They've been daily reveals, so they've been revealing content every day, which means that there might be one more thing that you're missing out on as far as this video goes, because there's one more day left in the campaign. So we have a full 24 hours left for you to benefit from this video. I guess there will be late pledges as well, but I'm just gonna click through this. It's just monsters, and it's bosses and monsters to fight against. That's all it is. Just lots more content. This is all being added for that additional, for that demigod pledge. You're getting the expansion as well as all this content. The $7 pledge, like I said already, you should basically be ignoring. Which kind of brings us to the should you back it. But let's just, I guess, just click through this more quickly towards the end, so you just see those last things in case you want to get a sense of it. We got our griffin over here, which is different than a hippogriff, because I never really remember the difference between them. We have our dark elf. We have our armored minotaur. Day 9. We should have. We have day 9, the Hell Traveler. We got more Thanatos over here, another boss to go through. We have a heavy Hell Walker for your miniatures to go through. You have your Siren boss, I think. No, that's the miniatures. Then we have Brenna Dowdy over here for another boss. Again, my pronunciation of all these is horrible. I've played God of War the video game, but never finished it, and also still don't know how to pronounce things. We have our Explosive Draugr over here. We have our Nymph as a miniature, I guess, not a boss. And we have Jarnfroter as another boss. Lots of those giant guys holding things. We have Helios as a boss, it looks like. And then we have Kratos with Valkyrie armor. Ooh, this is fun. Oh, I didn't know what this is. Miniature plus skill upgrades. Good. This I mentioned earlier. I want this kind of stuff. I haven't even seen the most recent ones. Deimos over here. Ooh, is that another character? This is another character. I should have looked at this stuff first. We have a Light Elf over here. What is this? Light Elf is going to be a miniature. We got more stuff happening? I like those last few. Anyways, as far as that's going to bring us to the should you back it, should you not, will it hold its value, all of that. And to that end, there's a few things to cover. There's, first of all, holding its value. Generally, if you look at CMON campaigns, while they don't do as well as they used to, they're still doing just fine as holding their value. If you look at, pledges of Cyberpunk or pledges of Dune, those are both games. And Cyberpunk, and I mentioned both those particularly because Dune's being very well received. Cyberpunk's getting more mixed reviews. Lots of people really enjoy it. Some people don't love it as much. But both those games are getting very solid return on. If you look at the secondhand market, if you look on eBay, if you look on BG Marketplace, they are still holding their value. People are still selling those for more than what people have paid for. And those are IP-based games, as is God of War, the board game. I am fully confident that this will continue to hold its value. Again, CMON titles have shifted over the years as far as how good of a value they hold, but if you're looking as to whether you can get your money back on this game if it's not for you, if you spend $240 or if you spend $90, whatever it is you get, and you want to see if this game is for you, and if it's not for you, you obviously have to go through the work of selling it, but yes, this will still hold its value. So if you want to try it, risk-free, so to speak, that's your option on the table. You could try this risk-free with the work being put in to go ahead and sell it. But again, looking at previous CMON titles, even with the changes of how well they are received over the years, they're still doing just fine. So yes, it will hold its value. As far as is it worth it, is it not? Or is this a glorified paperweight? If you're not selling it, if you're just getting it for you, is it worth the gameplay aspect? A lot of that comes down to how much you enjoy their titles. I generally am a fan of CMON's games. Not all of them. Many of them have not worked for me. I've abandoned Mendy's Zombicides over the years in favor of the ones that I really like versus the ones that I'm only okay with. Bloodborne is a game that didn't work for me. They've had a variety of games over the years that weren't for me. That either they've had better or just they weren't for me in general. Song of Ice and Fire is a too big of an experience that I don't enjoy as much to get into. So there are different games from them. Many of them I love, many of them not for me. This one very much does fall in the category of games I really enjoy. So I think it is one that if you like their style of games, if you like that miniature heavy, Ameritrash kind of experience where you're really going at things and just smashing things down while upgrading your characters, if you like that experience, I think this is another good one in that vein. As far as whether you need to get all of it, again, kind of comes down to your own personal preference. Personal experience. Are you someone who has historically gone through their games? For me, some of their titles, I've really benefited from having all their content. Games like Zombicide, like Cthulhu May Die, I've benefited from having all their content. Versus other games, Massive Darkness, I've still barely gone into the reaches of what that game has, and so some games I've managed to really benefit from having it all, and some games less so. For me, because of the similarities to God of War 2, Cthulhu May Die, this is one where I think that for me, based on the way I go into these games, this is one that I would enjoy having all the content, and the plug and play is a big factor as well. I'll link to it down below, but I did 2 full videos of when going all in was worth it for me. And one video was when it was worth going all in, one video where it wasn't going all in. And interestingly enough, CMON games were featured in both those videos very heavily. But there are certain reasons why games do and don't work for me as far as getting value, gameplay value from my all-in pledge. And for this one, I think it's the kind where, for me at least, I would get that benefit. But if you don't think you would, stick with that $90 pledge. Save yourself that additional $150 of extra cool goodness that looks great, but ultimately takes up shelf space, takes up mental space in your mind, and isn't getting tabled. So to a certain extent, you do have to look at your own past backing patterns to know whether you're getting value from that or not. And that's basically your Should You Back It for God of War the board game from CMON Games. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.